this one's got rubbing in it. That sort of thing.
It's definitely a romantic time for Ned on that. Thanks for coming, guys. We're going to do more of these. So beforehand we did, has anyone been to seminar or anything before? Yeah? No? So we do try and do a fair few of these, obviously in normal times, and try and focus on different things. But this one is going to be focused around habits and building positive habits for, like it says, maximum results. So we're going to go through some of the areas that we focus on, or that we think we should focus on, but at the end of after basically each habit, if you've got questions on that, I'll open up and we'll see if anyone's got anything, then we'll move on to the next one. So, Mike's put the date and the time there if you're wondering as well. Top 5. So we're going to talk about water, eating, being active, training and recovery. Okay?
Basically, anytime anyone's ever told you the secret of getting fit or any article or anything, it boils down to being one of these things. And it might be tarred up a little bit, but generally it's one of these things that people do.
So the first one is water. And we talk about this a lot. It's an area that we start with the majority of people. One, because a lot of people don't drink enough, but there's also a lot of benefits to obviously staying hydrated and a lot of negatives to being dehydrated as well. This is normally the time when everyone picks to drink. But in terms of, not even just in terms of like, we're not necessarily just talking about fat loss, we're not talking about training per se, we're talking about just generally mentally as well, being able to focus in the day. If you've trained in the morning and you go into work, like if you're dehydrated, you're going to have one of those days where you just have that foggy feeling in your head and you can't quite focus on things. So hydration is really important. We also talk about stuff like it keeps you more active, because people say like, oh, I don't want to drink so much because it means I go to the toilet all the time. Well, you should probably go to the toilet all the time. That's part of like your body's function. And if you're not, then you probably need to drink a little bit more. And how much you drink is dependent from person to person. We can't really put like you should drink X amount, because it does vary. It obviously varies in temperature as well, if we're in summer compared to winter. Person to person, body weight, whether you've trained or not trained. There's a lot of different things to come into how much you drink. But hydration is really important, and that's why we focus there a lot of the time before we even start talking about food or anything like that. Hydration is the first thing that we go to. You got anything else on that? So we're going to give you some little things to think about at the end of each of these habits. So the first one being, make it specific. So with that, you might have, and what we always say about is carrying something with you. So I know the majority of you guys would take like water bottles around with you, whether it's to work or whatever, but having a specific amount that you're aiming for the day, visually gives you a bit of feedback. So if you've got a full water bottle and you're aiming to finish that in the morning, you can visually see that you're going to get through 750 or whatever is in your water. In terms of, like I just said, in terms of the amounts, it can change day to day, but having a set target of what you're trying to hit for that day, and then if you go above it, then great, but if you're not hitting it, that's obviously something that we're trying to aim for. And that ties in with also making it visible. Because if it's in front of you, and you've got it there, especially when you're working, if it's sitting by your laptop, you're probably going to drink. If it's not there, and you have to make an effort to go to the kitchen or the kitchen at work or whatever it is, you're probably not going to do it. If it's there and it's in front of you, you're going to do it, and it'll probably become a bit of a habit. And then also setting reminders. So with this, it might be certain points in the day that you're trying to achieve X amount. And I always like, with hydration, one of your times that you're most dehydrated is when we first wake up in the morning, because obviously we've not drank for however many hours. So I always like, and people might say that it's not the right way to do this or whatever, this is just me personally, I like taking quite a lot in first thing. So you might box off 500ml first thing in the morning, and straight away it puts your body in a decent position, so then if you're having a coffee or you're having tea or whatever after that, you've had a fair amount of water. And again, if your target was 2 litres, you quarter the way there. So it puts you in a really good position first thing. But also if you get to the afternoon, if you know that you've got a really busy day, say you've got back-to-back meetings or whatever it is, say you set a reminder at 2 o'clock that you should have had, say 1.5 litres or whatever it is, then that pops off on your phone and you can sort of judge where you're at. So using little things like reminders will keep you on track with it as well.
I think with that one is you controlling it rather than your body controlling it. When your body is already telling you you're thirsty or you're dehydrated, you were thirsty a while before that. And it lets you know in loads of other different ways by either losing concentration. Anyone ever craved like juicy food, like fruits and things like that, hungover usually, yeah? But through the day, and if you being dehydrated and your body can tell you through craving food, that it's just one of the ways that your body will let you know, and that will give you a reminder that you should be drinking more water. Those sorts of things will happen a lot less when you are hydrated through the day. And one that works really well is knowing that you should drink a set amount with each meal. That could be a reminder, simple as that. So it could be 500 ml with breakfast, it could be a litre by the time you're eating your lunch, and then 500 ml at dinner, and then that's it, that's your day done. That's a lot of water, and it's not that hard
I always go to bed with a glass of water, so when I wake up, it's the first thing I do is drink a full glass of water.
Yeah. And that's a consideration as well, actually. I know you said you have it in the morning, but because it becomes hard, because some people then say if I drink too late in the day, I'll be up in the night, which can be the case, can't it? So your window, I always look at your window as being maybe a couple of hours before you go into sleep. So from the point that you wake up to a couple of hours before you go to sleep, that's like your window to get your water in. Because if you go after that, you probably are going to be up in the night, and obviously it disrupts sleep and all the rest of it, which we don't want to do. So it does narrow it a touch, but yeah, doing things like that and preparing, it means it's there, and then it just becomes the habit to do, doesn't it? It's there and you just do it straight away.
There's a reason that people that drink a lot of water naturally are smoke about it because they feel great all the time. Yeah. It's quite a bad way of looking at it as well. But if you do drink a lot of water, you don't have a lot of these sort of issues popping up. And the reason it's such an important habit is because the more you do it, the more often you do it, the better you will get with all of us problems that it sort of causes being dehydrated.
Has anyone got anything else on water? No?
Which is better for you, still or fizzy?
I'd say in terms of what's better, I'd probably say still, but if you were to say if you were not going to drink water compared to drinking sparkling or whatever it's going to be, drink sparkling.
I've got so used to it now that water's actually become not my favourite drink, but I just drink it constantly.
Yeah. I think when you're training a lot as well, you want it, don't you? Like after training, you need to take water in because you just feel dehydrated. And there's no other drink really, is there, that hydrates you as well as water. Like I'm sure we could argue a few alcoholic drinks taste nice when you're dehydrated, but they probably don't do the same thing. And the same with like teas and coffees and things. Yeah, it tastes great, and by all means have them, but they're not hydrating you, so they're not doing the job. But I'd always say that with that, like if because I've got people I work with that drink sparkling water, and I know that if I told them not to do that, they wouldn't drink, or they'd have like fizzy drinks or whatever. So it's a much better option. But I'd probably always just say try and get just standard water in. And then the other thing with it is if you don't, some people say not liking the taste of it, put things in it. So you can put like coffee shops do it, and you put bits of cucumber and stuff in it, and that makes it taste different, or berries or different things like that. If it's the taste that you don't like, you can add stuff into it as well, and it just makes it a little bit nicer, I suppose.
If you really struggle with drinking other things a lot more, most times it's coffee or like Diet Cokes and things like that. People like to drink a lot. A really good way of doing it is a water target before you drink any of that, and emptying that water target up. So if you need a coffee in the morning before anything else, give yourself a target of 1 glass of water before a coffee, because you'll do it to get to what you want. It's the same with work with people all the time that she would walk to work with a Pepsi Max. It wasn't Max case, and she drinks nearly 2 litres of it a day, and we got her up to the you're actually in a way better place, rather than just saying, I'm never going to drink that again and deprive yourself of it, like some people sparkling water. If you went, actually I'm going to drink a litre of water before I have the first sparkling, and then you go like that. You're only weaning yourself off.
Just on that as well, when we said about what I water, I said at the start, we're not going to focus this solely around like body fat and dropping body weight or whatever, but if that was a target, that it helps with satiety or controlling satiety and hunger. So if you're hydrated, you're going to be less hungry basically throughout the day. So that's again why it's important to get it in the start of the day. Because if you skip it at the start of the day and maybe you don't get a full breakfast in or whatever, you get to lunchtime, you're absolutely starving. And you're literally grabbing at anything. So it's just important just to get it up there, get the hydration up there first thing, and it'll just control satiety a little bit throughout the day as well. Anything else on that? Water, no? If you think of anything else on that. Eating. Why do we eat? So obviously this is a big one, but in a way, these aren't necessarily like in priority, because I think it depends a little bit on the person, but water comes first for a lot of people before we even start talking about food, because of the impact on satiety and all the rest of it. But obviously eating is really important. This is a big factor of what we're doing day to day. Recovering, we're going to talk about recovering a little bit, but recovery from training, food becomes really important. Making sure that you're energised for the next session as well. So there's a lot of factors to food, and also this is an area of nutrition that is massively complicated because people have complicated it. So what we try and do when we're looking at it is simplify it, because if we look at it in straight fact, it is pretty simple. We generally know the foods we should eat a lot of. We generally know the foods that we should eat less of, and that's not to say not eating them either, like just less of. So that's the general rule. Anything past that, when you start hearing people claiming all these different things, pay very little attention to it, because you can go into all sorts of. My mister said something to me last night, I can't remember what it was, but I was just like, I can't believe these sorts of things are out there, because it just confuses the hell out of people. It comes to me what she said, I can't remember what she said.
The other thing is why water is before eating. It's because being dehydrated causes bad eating habits. When you feel like you need a pick me up of energy, you go to sugar, you go to something that's going to put you up, when in fact you could, or often people are dehydrated. When you're bored and your body starts to crave a little bit, you might not get that same sort of reaction if you were hydrated. So that's the reason they come before. A lot of people, when they think about being healthy, straight away food, whereas water comes before it.
So these are the points that we've brought up. So planning ahead. So we talk about like prepping your food, or not even necessarily prepping your food, but having a plan in your head of where you're going to go and what you're going to eat. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you've got to take a Tupperware to work and that you've got to have the food made beforehand, but the last thing you want to be doing is stepping into the city centre and being like, I'm starving, I need some food. So it's having a plan, and it might be a few different places and a few different things that you get in those different places, but having that plan ahead of time just means that you know where you're going, you know what you're taking control of it. And then the other,
Read the menu before you go to places as well. It's really easy if you know where you're going. If you're really trying to be good at, say, you're going out on Wednesday and you don't want to eat shit because you're training on Thursday or whatever the reason might be, there's plenty of places with a better option than others. Yeah? And that doesn't mean sweet potato chips instead of chips. It means like, could you go for a steak with some veg instead of lasagna? Maybe you could in a lot of places. So you could just make the choice beforehand and planning ahead with where you're going. Makes it simple like that. That one also goes, planning ahead also goes for hangover, yeah? You've got some good food in your house, you're much more likely to eat it, go shopping on a hangover, or flick a food delivery on a hangover, we all know what happens.
the other, I suppose, the extreme of this is when I've talked about Tupperwares and prepping your food and stuff. Obviously that is an option, like making stuff.
Yeah.
We always try and make big meals at night that will carry over to the next day's lunches and things like that, because it just becomes easier. Making bigger curries or bigger chilies or whatever it is, and just making the portion for the next day, it just becomes really easy. There's obviously companies that do food prep services and things like that, which people use as well, and this is why, because they're taking back a bit of control, and you know exactly what you consume, and if you're taking your box to work with whatever it's got in it, that's what you're having. So planning ahead is really important in terms of nutrition, and it's, like I said, I think there's different levels to that. Controlling your environments kind of ties in with what I was talking about in terms of having a plan in your head of where you're going to go and what you're going to have. But also with this, Lloyd's touched on it a little bit in terms of like your home, like having certain things in the house. If your cupboards are full of generally good stuff, that's what you're going to eat. And it's the same at work. If anyone's in the offices and stuff like that, like if the office has got good options around you, that's what you're going to go for. And because it becomes more of an option to go for anything else. More of a inconvenience, I suppose, to go for anything else, because you have to then go to the shop or whatever it is. If it's there, you're probably going to have it. So it's just taking back that control in your environment. You got anything on that one, no? And then the 80-20, so I said before, we generally know what we should be eating. We generally know what we shouldn't be eating as much of, and that's what that is. Like, we never push this to be 100%. We're not going to talk about restrictive, rigid diet plans or anything like that, because they last for limited days. Like, if anyone's done anything like that, you're probably talking like, you can maybe stretch it to 2 weeks, maybe 3-4 weeks, and then you start losing your mind. So you've got to allow for this. Like, this has got to be somewhere within your lifestyle, your nutrition. This might be having a few beers at the weekend, it might be having a takeaway, anything. But the 20% is important, but I think the important factor is that you can flick between the two. And that's where people probably get it wrong, is they'll do 80% throughout the week, and then they'll go to the 20%, they'll go out for beers or whatever and have a takeaway or whatever, and they'll be like, alright, I'll just keep it going. And this suddenly turns into the 80%, and then that will go to the 20%. It's just important that if you do it, or when you do it, you can then just revert back to it. So it goes back into planning ahead. So say you're out on a Saturday night, and all week you've stuck to good nutrition, you've kept yourself fueled, energized for the week, you've recovered really well. The Saturday night you're going to go out, you flick to the 20%, you get your few drinks or your takeaway or whatever. The next day, you've already got stuff in the house, you've controlled your environment, you've got a decent breakfast in there, you've got some good snacks and things like that you can have throughout the day. And then the Monday comes, you've got your breakfast, you've prepared with your water, all that sort of stuff, and then you've literally just flicked between them, it's been seamless. And mentally that gives you, you're not on a diet, because the word diet is a bit of a weird one, because if you think you're on or off a diet, like we're all on diets, like that's, our diet is what we eat, but it doesn't mean it's got to be super restrictive, it's just what we consume. So it's just that there's a lot of psychology that comes into nutrition and diets and things like that, but the 80-20 is really important. And I think not only just controlling the ratio, I think it's being able to transition between the two. I think that's the important thing.
We touched on this at the beginning a little bit. The 80-20 thing is like a general one, and I know that is one that people brand as if they're on an 80-20 diet. But the basis of it is that you have to be able to keep it up, you have to be able to maintain it. Most diets, not all the extreme ones, but most diets you've ever heard of work, as in can be healthy and can get you great like physical results. All the big ones, what you think of like Atkins and Weight Watchers and whatever else you might have heard of. Most of them haven't got a brand like that. Most of them would work. The difference is that you can't do it for longer than 2 weeks because it's too restrictive to your life. So it's one birthday party and it's done. And they put you in the mentality of you do it or you don't. Whereas like this, then say you can flip between the two. If you can get control on this, you can be in a good position 80% of the time, you can get great physical results, great position where you can feel really good all the time without having to beat yourself up that you've done that 20% for any amount of time.
It's just trying to keep that balance, I think, making sure that this doesn't go too high. Like we want the 20% and then try and keep it around about 20% and then focusing on keeping this as optimal as possible. And again, this isn't restrictive. This is just making sure that you're keeping yourself healthy, you're keeping yourself energized, you're recovering well. And when you're training consistently, that will tell you whether your nutrition's on track or not. Because I'm sure we've all had times when you stepped in the gym, you start training, you just feel absolutely knackered or more sore than what you were before or something like that. And that just means that maybe you've had a bit of the 20% going on, or maybe you've just not optimised this quite as much as what you could have done. Maybe it wasn't eating as much as what you needed or something like that. So it's just making sure that I think it stays around about that, but then being able to transition and making sure you optimise the 80%. Anything on that one? No. I feel like we're going to get a lot of questions here. So why being active? So being active, activity we talk about, I always try and think of it at different intensities, activity, and we want to try and tick them all off. So when you're doing a session in the gym, I think you pretty much agree that it's pretty high intensity, because you're working hard, like you're going to be burning a lot of calories, your heart rate's going to be right up there, but it isn't the only form of activity. Obviously a lot of people are wearing watches or carrying phones now, and it tracks our steps. That's a low intensity activity, depending on how fast you walk. But generally, like if you're aiming for a certain amount of steps per day, that's your low intensity activity. So we've got a high intensity and we've got a low intensity activity, and then you can also fill it in with sort of medium intensities as well. So by that, I'd think more about maybe like yoga classes, Pilates, things like that are still challenging, but you'd probably say they're not going to be quite as intense. Well, some yoga classes are, depending on what type you do, but they're not going to be quite as intense as like a condition, for example, which is a high intensity, or going for a bit of a run or getting on the bike or something like that. It's not as low intensity as just getting your steps, which are probably not even, you're not focusing on doing necessarily. It might just be you getting around town, but it's just that middle point of, can you get an extra bike ride in a week, or a little jog or something like that, which is ticking off the medium. So I think it's important to tick the high intensity one off, but if you're training consistently, you're going to be doing that. The low one comes from steps and just general activity. So, and again with that, like we spoke about with water, there's a whole different sort of variation on how many you want to be going for. People talk about like trying to aim for X amount of steps. I think as long as you've got to take where you're at and think about what your goals are. So with that, if you're hitting, say, standard 6,000 steps a day, but one of your aims is just trying to start getting a little bit leaner, try and up it a bit. Maybe go for 8 or 10, because that's increasing your activity overall. If you're happy with doing that and you feel like generally you're recovering well, and you're training well in the gym, you feel recovered to train well in the gym, 6,000 might be fine. So it's just trying to track it and just think of it like that. And then that middle one, I think that's probably the one that generally people probably don't do as much of, because we train in the gym, we get our steps in generally, and then just something in the middle. And it might be different stuff as well, but generally just staying active, I think, is those 3 intensities, trying to box each one off. So every little helps. That ties in with the step count and the medium intensity, I think.
If you're trying to take up the difference of what I'm saying is, if your average is at 6 a day and you want to take it to 8, the difference would be taking the stairs to the office, it could be taking the stairs instead of escalators, it could be a walk to the shop, it could be getting off the tram 1 stop earlier, it could be, there's the tiny little differences in the day that could make a 2,000 a day, but over the week, over the month, it adds up to a lot, which can create a big difference in your results, or even just how you're feeling.
Compound interest.
Yeah.
And that's exactly that, it's think big picture. Yeah, so making those small little, so if you've got, like Lloyd said, maybe you've got 50 steps in your building or something like that, and I know that might be miles off for some, but if that's the case, you do that every single day, and you may be doing it twice a day, it suddenly starts topping up. So it's not necessarily making drastic changes, it's those little changes that can make a big overall change.
If you're on the 20th floor, you can still get off at the 18th and walk up. You don't have to walk lots of it. So that's where you're at.
And then the other one I sort of missed when I was talking about the intensities, having fun. And with this one, I revert to like, it doesn't necessarily need to be a sport, but something that you enjoy that has an activity element to it. So it could be a sport, it could be going playing like whatever it is with your mates, because generally a lot of sports, majority of sports, are going to have an element of activity to them. But it could be anything. It could be going out and playing, like there's a picture in the background there of someone walking a dog. It could be taking your dog or someone else's dog out and going to the park or whatever, and that sort of thing gets your activity level up. There's loads of different things, but it's just a case of that becomes very personal, I think, to you, what you enjoy. Because also if you enjoy it, you're going to stick to it and you're going to do it again and again. And we always say that in the gym, if people truly do not like training in the gym, you don't necessarily have to train in the gym to get the results you want, because it's probably going to last short term, whereas longer term results are going to come from you doing something you enjoy. Like people playing sports or whatever it is, they go back because they like it. Apart from when you start getting punched in the face. Anything on that one? Probably joking. Stumped me. And then training. So when I said about that, everyone in here trains. So obviously training is a big part of any sort of thing we're trying to push towards, whether it's physically or mentally, I think, as well. The amount of people I speak to that talk about the sort of psychological impact it has on everything else, like I think it's really important, but obviously the physical side of it is equally important as well, whatever results you're trying to push towards. So we've just bought, I don't know if anyone's seen the new sign up in the gym, the 3 C's. And commitment is one of them, because you've got to be committed to your program. Like whatever that is, you've got to be committed. And that means making the right choices. That when we had the 80% up before, that comes down to essentially making the right choices for the 80% of the time. And that's committing to whatever you're trying to do. I'm going to use it as another example. You're going into a boxing camp, you've got to be committed to go into that camp and do the right things. Like, and it's only the same for anything that you're trying to set it up to do. You might be training for a marathon, a half marathon, a 10K. You might be trying to get a certain like fat loss goal, whatever it is. You've got to commit, and you've got to be ready to make the right choices, because there'll be certain things that come up, and we've got it up there, obstacles that come up in the way, where you could easily go, yeah, I'll just skip it, or no, I'm committed to it, so I'm going to make the right choice.
The big thing with most, especially physical goals when it comes to training, if you've got a 10K time you want to hit, or weight you want to lift, or anything like that, people are always promised a lot, often in programs or in and out, whether there's the best way or the shortcut, and generally there is not. You want to learn how to do a pull-up, you've got to get on the bar, you've got to struggle at it, and you've got to keep going, and one day you'll get to the point where you do one with some structure, with obviously the right program. But it's the same, if you want to get to a 10K time and you don't go running, you're probably not going to get there. You have to get to the program, you have to just keep working and commit to the program. It's a huge part of it.
And I know it's not put on here, but another one out there is consistency, and that ties in with that as well. So it's committing to something and then being consistent with it, and then that leads you to what you're going to do. Like the pull-up's a good example, because for a lot of people it seems just out of reach, but you have to do those 2 C's: be committed and be consistent to hit it, and then it comes. Changing it up. So sometimes with training, it can get repetitive, and this is obviously our job to try and make sure it doesn't. But if people are training in other gyms, or training by yourself, or running, for example, sometimes it can get a bit repetitive. So it's important, when we spoke about before the fun element of the activity, I think not necessarily that you enjoy every single second of training, but there has to be that you have to enjoy it to a certain degree. And sometimes it is just a case of changing it up. It might be, and I think this as well ties in with setting some goals, because you might take a change where you're going, right, my goal used to be this, but now it's a little bit more focused around getting my beach body. But if you want to get your beach body and you've not been training necessarily the right way to do it, you need to make that change to try and divert your goals towards what you now want. And that can change. Like, there's no reason why we have to be training for the same thing all the time. Like, we can change it up, and again, it's personal. There might be some personal goals that you've got. It might be, like I say, trying to do a run, or trying to train for an event, or whatever it is, or literally just aesthetic goals. Whatever it is, you've got to try and think that what you're doing going to take you to that point, and if it's not, it's probably the point to try and change things up a little bit. And then making it easy. That doesn't mean putting the weight down on the bar and lifting no weight. What it does mean is getting into a good routine with it, and like obviously training has to fit within your routine, doesn't it? Or you have to make it fit within your routine. Because if it doesn't, it becomes more of a chore, and then it's going to become a lot harder to stick to. And again, going back to the C's, commitment and consistency, we're going to struggle with keep staying committed, and we're going to struggle with consistency, and it's putting another obstacle in the way. So it might be that you set out to train at the end of the day, and work keeps getting in the way, you keep getting called into different meetings, and you keep missing sessions. Can you take control of it? Can we revert to the morning, for example? And then that might be, oh no, I can't do it in the morning because I've got to get up early. Well, you got to commit. You got to try and do it.
This one comes back to a lot of why we set this gym up as well. Making it easy means essentially wanting to go. A lot of people like to think of training as some sort of punishment or chore that they have to do. Whereas if you actually get to the gym, even if it is a little bit hard and there's a few too many burpees that you want to do yourself, but if you're with a few people, you're going to laugh, and you know the environment's going to be good and you're going to feel better at the end of it, it's an easier choice than going to the gym and not knowing what you're doing and becoming repetitive. We set up this gym to try and make that decision, what should I go or not, a little bit easier for some people. And it doesn't have to be here, it could be making it easy with the training if it was running or if it was something else like that, boxing training. You've got to make it fit your lifestyle. You said before, you have to get some food in to get ready for it. It comes to absolutely everything.
And the other one, again, we take control of in here, but anything outside, changing it up is why we plan the Perform program the way we do. It changes every 3 weeks. Keeps it fresh. If we kept you on that same cycle for 12 weeks, okay, you get good results because you keep getting stronger, but it just becomes repetitive. So we throw different movements at you, different exercises, different weights, different tempos. Because of this, it's got to be changed up. And the conditions planned the way it is as well. You get different trainers. There's different structures within those trainers as well, so everyone has their own little spin on it. You might use different kit. Condition, you don't know what you're coming into. You could be coming into a hell of a lot of burpees, a hell of a lot of jump squats, or whatever it is. You could be coming into a kettlebell session, you just don't know. So there's that element of that to it, but it is just important just to think about that. Just to think about whether what you're doing right now is taking you to where you want to go. And if it isn't, is there any sort of tweaks or changes you need to make? Anything on that one? You guys are quiet. If you do think of anything and you don't want to just ask it just yet, save it for the end, because I think running these is good, but then we want to make it specific as well. You guys have come and given up the time to come, so if you've got anything, there's no stupid questions. Like, if you want to make it specific to you, then let's ask them that in a little bit.
I've got one.
Yeah.
For me, what sort of food do you guys eat?
It's a hard one to answer because, well, between the three of us, it probably fluctuates.
Yeah, but what do you eat? Like,
What do I
breakfast, breakfast, lunch, evening meal.
The way I try and approach it, because I don't think I can answer that as if to say like these are the foods I eat, because it changes. What I would say is I try and stick, that 80% is not just something that we tell people to do, like we stick to that as well. So I always try and think about eating as natural as possible, as close to single ingredient as possible. And by that I mean you could pluck it out of the tree, take it out of the ground. But that's not to say I never eat anything out of a can or a tin or anything like that. I just go as close to that as I can. and then allowing that 20%, like I'll have booze at weekends, like we'll have takeaways, things like that, but I'll just revert back to that 80%. But, no, I was just going to say, in terms of like specifics, it's hard. Like there's certain things that I do in my day. I'll give you an example, right? So in the mornings, we get in the gym early. So what Vicky was saying about in the morning, first thing, is getting up. I get water first thing, as soon as I get up. But I make my breakfast the night before. And there's no coppers, but I eat it in my car on the way in. So it'll be things that I can literally grab and have, because I don't want, I get up early, so I don't want to really sacrifice any more of my
cereal.
yeah. I don't want to sacrifice any more of my sleep to get up early, and if I had to do that, then I would. But I can prepare something, have it in the fridge, wake up in the morning, grab it, get in the car and go, and then I can eat it in the car. So I'll do things like, stink my car out, I'll do boiled eggs. I'll make like chicken sausages and maybe a handful of nuts or something like that, because these are fast things that I know I'm getting something into my body straight away. And it's put me in a good position because I'm hydrated and I've already got some food inside me and I can come straight into sessions when we get here. So that's just like one example. But then you have to make things fit throughout your day.
One of the things that we as coaches, we've been, me and Ben especially, we've been training pretty seriously since we were really young. So in our teenage years, we were already looking at things like this, improving when you should eat, all stuff like that. So we've been on this, especially when I've done loads of different versions of, you should do this diet, okay, I'm going to do that, and I've done it. Or you should try drinking this many shakes, and I've done it, and it was not nice. So I've found a routine which works, which is why we talk so much about building a routine for you. Some of the stuff that we say, Ben, routine is absolutely amazing if you can do it. So it's the same rules, keep applying to it. If that works for you, that works for Ben, and he knows it works for him, he knows he feels good, and that's why he does it. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's what you should be doing. It's about understanding all of this and putting it into a routine that you can follow, which is, I know, very vague, but it's what it is.
I'd also say what we said about before in terms of different approaches. So everyone's probably heard of keto and fasting and all these things that have been like trends. I take elements of pretty much all of it. So I don't do one. I'm not like the keto guy or the fasting guy or whatever, but there'll be days I fast just because it fits better into my day. And I know that it's not going to do any damage. And I know that then if I do fast, I have to keep my water up and I have to get my calories in at the back end of the day, or that window, whatever it is, because I understand how fasting affects me. And then it also causes me not to panic that I've not had any breakfast, I'm starving. No, my body can survive without it. But that doesn't mean I do it every day. Majority of days I'll do what I said. But then other things like keto, it'd be like, maybe I'm having a few days where I'm not necessarily training as much, and I can just take the carbs back a little bit, just because I don't feel I necessarily need them. That's not to say I'm suddenly reverting into ketosis. It's not. It's just taking that sort of approach, putting it in for those few days. And then when I do start training again, I know I need a few more carbohydrates, now timing right and things like that. So that's where it becomes confusing, these different approaches. But I just feel like you've got to understand them all, and then you've got to take the little bits when you need them of each different approach and put it into your lifestyle. Because you might not be up at the same time as me, but you might work till 11, 12 o'clock at night, but I'm in bed by that time. So your day is completely different to mine. And there's different things that go on in our days, so different challenges that go on in the day. You might be in different cities, or you might not spend any time in the car, but you might be in an office all day, or on trains, or whatever it is. Like, there's different things that come up. So no, it's a good question, but it'll be hard to answer so specific. There's just certain things that you've got to try and develop across time.
I said it before, I said right at the beginning, it's not one way. And when people ask for the best, and you've heard it all the time, running's the best thing for fat loss. And the person that told you that lost fat whilst running, so they think it's the best because it worked for them. It's the same with eating. There is no the best. You've got to find your way with it. And if somebody tells you this is the one that works, this is, then just means it worked for them, and that's cool. Maybe it'll work for you, but you've got to figure it out yourself.
What's the best way? Do you have any tips to wean myself off of processed sugar?
question.
Yeah.
I think it all comes down to, I always try and look at nutrition as a positive, not negative. So as soon as you start thinking you can't have X, one, you'll want it even more, because we go into like the kid mentality, don't we? Don't eat that cereal over there, there's Frosties and all that sort of stuff. You want it more. But what I always try and do is like, right, we're trying to have less of this. Let's focus on having this. And that might be like, it's hard to go into specifics, but I'm trying to give you a bit of something to think about. Like, have a list of things that you're going to try and put in place rather than those snacks. And when you get into that mindset of, it might be a habit thing that you just want to grab it because you do it at that time, or it might be a bit of a hunger thing. And if it is that, you've got the stuff straight away. You're like, right, I'm hungry, bang, I can go to that. I can eat that. And then it just gives you, instead of thinking about you not having what you're trying to avoid, you're thinking positively about what you're trying to consume. That's always the better way about thinking about nutrition. And it also means that when we're talking about habits, we're creating positive habits. I'm sure everyone, if you really think about certain things that you've done, and it's not necessarily just nutrition, you've created habits somewhere by swapping something out for something else. Like, and that could be anything really, but you've probably done it at some point. So apply the same sort of thing to nutrition. And it might not be snacks like that. It might be like, say you have a takeaway a few nights a week. Like, rather than saying, right, you're not going to have any more takeaways, is there a better option at the takeaway? Could you replicate a similar sort of thing at home, making it yourself? So you're still pretty much having a similar sort of food, but it's in your control a little bit more. Like, these are just ways I'd think about it and approach it, a bit more positive, less restrictive way of going about it.
Yeah, because for me, when I first started training years ago, I took out most of processed sugar, but now I rediscovered processed sugar.
Yeah, well that's the thing that a lot of people do, isn't it? Like, I speak to people a lot and they're like, right, I'm not going to have any bad stuff. And I'm like, well, how long's that going to last?
Yeah.
Like, that's great, and then obviously trying to make a change, but how long is it really going to last? Or do we say, we can keep a bit of it in, but let's have these as replacements and allow that 20% of the time for you to do it? Because then you're probably going to stick to that.
Because there's a point where it gets too much, right? You can say that I love, we've all done it with food at Christmas, right? Most people say, love cheese, mate, yeah? 5, 6, 7 days of Christmas in England full of cheese and wine. And then by January you're like, actually, I don't want any for it, even if it's only a day for some people. But there's a point where it becomes, actually I don't want it anymore. So you crave it because you're restricting it a lot of the time. If you allow yourself to go here and there, then you crave it a lot less.
And it's potentially looking at the big picture as well, hydration, things like that. Because the thing with snacking as well, you've got to look and see, is it a hunger thing or is it habit? Sometimes it'll be habit that you do that, and last thing at night is one for certain people, isn't it? They have certain things at certain times because that's what they do.
Yeah.
Well, to change that habit, it's making small changes. It's not to say stop doing it, stop going in the fridge. But can you take something better out of the fridge? We were joking at ours last night actually, because Les kept opening the fridge and looking at it, and I was like, what are you looking for in there? She went, I'm just looking. That's what kids do, isn't it? Just looking. You don't even want anything, you're just going in there just to see what's in there.
It's the first thing I do when I go to a Walmart.
Exactly.
My parents' fridge is in like the hallway from the kitchen to the hall, and that it's a genuine, they have to shout at me. Stop it. Walk past it and open it.
But it's just a habit, isn't it? You just want to see what's in there, see if there's anything that takes your fancy, rather than going, I want this, let's go and get it. So it's just little changes. But if that was at home and it was your fridge, and you could change what was in it, then you might open it and go, oh yeah, I've got that actually over there, I'll have that. Or I made them the other day, or whatever.
There's a big habit people think you crave, just for our own subject, is something sweet after a meal. Like you've been taught that that was what you need. You don't need that. It's just a habit. It's ingrained. You can get out of if you wish to. Otherwise, replacing it for something that isn't, chocolate cake is often the better way. If it was something that was still sweet, still gave you that, but wasn't as a negative, it was positive, then you can get around it. But most people have got that in their brains, including me. And it's just ingrained from when you were a toddler.
And then recovery. So we touched on it a little bit already with like food and things like that. Like that comes into your recovery, but this is an important thing for everyone in here because you train so hard. Like we've all had times where you get sore, and stairs are a struggle, and sitting down is a struggle, and all the rest of it. Recovery is really important, and how you go about that, there's numerous different ways, but the activity that we spoke about before becomes important for recovery. I have loads of discussions with people throughout the week when they say about being sore, and they say like I suppose the old school thing was, you just lie on the sofa and put your feet up, don't you? It doesn't improve anything. Doing a bit of sort of low, like what we spoke about before, low to medium intensity exercise when you're sore can actually help things a hell of a lot, even though you don't want to do it. You don't want to have a stretch because it hurts. You don't want to go for a walk because it hurts. But afterwards, it can make you feel better. So recovery is really important.
The big one that we try and spell with that when we stood up on the wall, you said it to me the other day, no pain, no gain. Nope, that's not it. Training, trying to eat well, trying to be healthy shouldn't be a painful process. The gym isn't a chore, it's not a slog, you shouldn't be dragging yourself through some awful diet just to get there. You can recover well, feel good and get results. So that's what we prefer you to do if you can. Get you to a point where you can actually enjoy the rest of your time and still be getting results in the gym. It doesn't have to hurt you or your lifestyle or anything like that.
I like being sore.
There's times that you're gonna get sore, and some people do like the feeling because they feel like they've done a lot, don't you? But
There's a level to that.
you don't want to be like that all the time.
My legs are hurting and I can feel it walking down the stairs and I couldn't get off the sofa. Two different things. And some people like chase fatigue, so they want, oh yeah, it's the best leg day ever, I could barely walk. That's probably not a good idea if you've got to go to work or if you've got kids or if you've got stuff on there. That's not the goal. The goal is to either be stronger or be faster or look better or just feel good at the end of it, surely. So that's not the goal of what we're after.
It's also if it restricts your next session. So if you train on Tuesday, you're in absolute pieces, and you don't train on Wednesday because you're sore from Tuesday, like we'd much rather you train both days, like because you've got your frequency there, and we're talking about routine as well now. And this is obviously routine more towards recovery. So this might be like setting something in the week where you walking in the evening. So there's numerous benefits to it. If you had a stressful day, it's good to get out. But if you've had a tough workout that day, getting blood flow going, getting the legs moving a little bit, like that can help with the recovery. And it might be that you put that in a few nights a week. That becomes a routine. It might be that you go to a yoga session on the weekend where you're not necessarily doing as much training maybe. And you add a yoga session in per week. Put there a little and often as well, because it doesn't have to be a full session. Like a recovery session doesn't have to be a full session. If you know that when you train you get really tight quads, could you do a quad stretch each night? 30 seconds on each side, a minute work, just to help ease the tightness in the quads. And that could be anywhere. It might be your back. People get tight, sore backs. Could you do a back stretch each night? Or a few like cat and camel movement for 30 seconds, but every day, little and often, every day. Because that's going to help.
It doesn't have to be a thing you have to go to the gym for. You can do things like that while doing it.
Because in terms of recovery and mobility and flexibility, this is where people make the biggest progress, is where you don't do like a full stretching routine that takes 2 hours and you do it once every 4 weeks, because that doesn't do anything. It might make you feel good that night, but then you'll just tighten up again. But if you do it consistently, if you do a stretch consistently, that's where you get the big sort of progress.
The videos you did in lockdown were really helpful for that. did a lot more stretching than I would
Yeah.
just by watching them.
And with those as well, because obviously they were 30 minutes,
Mm.
you don't even have to do the whole thing. You'll know yourself that when we do like the warm-ups in any of the sessions, there'll be certain things that you'll be like, oh, that's tight. And it might not be the same as the person next to you. Like everyone's got different areas that they'll struggle with a little bit more. So take those areas and take those movements, and they're probably ones for you to work on, away from the gym as well as here. And that's not to say you not do the other ones, because when you're in the warm-up you can do them, because obviously there's other benefits to it as well. But you'll know in yourself, it might be neck, it might be back, upper back, lower back, it might be hips, hamstrings, feet, calves, like it could be completely, it could be a few areas, it could be all of them. But yeah, doing it little and often, and then making it a priority. So
Can I just ask, sorry, do you know on a little and often?
yeah,
Does that apply to food? Because sometimes, for me personally, I'll wake up, I like warm breakfast. and
Yeah.
It's not every time I want to cook. So I'll maybe skip breakfast, have a little lunch, and then have a big dinner. Is that a good thing, or do we have to do little a lot?
I think it depends on the bigger picture, because that was like a trend a bit ago, wasn't it? That you eat small meals throughout the day, and you have, instead of having 3 meals, like I suppose traditionally a lot of people do, you have 5 or 6 small ones throughout the day. And if that works for you, do it. And if you find it's better for you, do it. But what you've got to look at the overall picture in terms of nutrition. Are you getting where you want to get in terms of, is it maintaining weight, is it dropping weight, is it adding weight? Because if you're not, then you probably need to make a change. If you are, and you're going the right way, or you're maintaining, or whatever it is, keep doing what you're doing. And then I'd look at, are you energized for sessions, are you recovering? And if those are yes as well, stick to it. And if someone questions it and says, no, I do this, I have 3 meals a day, you want to try that? Well, you know that it works for you, so don't change. Well, if it doesn't, it's making changes, isn't it? And it doesn't have, when you make a change with any sort of routine and habit, it doesn't have to be drastic either. You don't have to suddenly go from maybe having 2 meals a day to having 6 meals a day. Like, it doesn't have to be that big. It doesn't have to be that you've never trained before in the gym and suddenly you're going to do 6 sessions a week. Like, they're big, big jumps that you don't need to make. So if it is a case of maybe you have little and often at the moment, and whether you don't feel you're getting the right results, or you feel sore, or you're not energized or whatever, you just got to look at it and say, right, what changes am I going to make? It might be trying to have a bit more in meals and bringing the meal frequency down, possibly changing what you're having in those meals. There's different things, different ways you can go about it. That's also, Steph, what we use the check-ins for. Because the check-ins with Mike, we can go specific. So you can go in and say, like, this is my approach at the moment. Like, what do you think I should change to get this result out of it? And then we can start getting more specific with it as well.
Big thing with this at the bottom now, especially when it comes to recovery, by making it a priority, is that you just got to understand, you've always got to remember that you get no results in the gym. You don't lose weight, you don't get stronger, you don't get faster, you don't get fitter inside the gym. That 1 hour that you're in the gym isn't the productive part. The 23 hours that you're not in the gym is the productive part. If you can focus on these little things for recovery, you feel good after the training, the day, a good session, yeah, a little bit of pain, but if you're super sore, if you're feeling really sluggish, that's your body not getting what it needs to be fitter, leaner, stronger. It's a sign that your body is giving it by making you feel a bit shit. That's how your body communicates with it, generally through pain all the time. So if it's not getting what it needs, it will let you know. So training should make you feel better. If you're feeling good whilst you're training often, eating well and monitoring it and moving on, that's where the results come in, not whilst you're in the gym. That extra few reps is great, but it doesn't mean anything if you don't help your body recover from it.
We do the damage, essentially.
Yeah, that's it.
I don't know if anyone's ever seen the graph at training where it's sort of, you train and you drop, and then you recover. You train, you drop, you recover. So overall, the trend of the line goes up. But when you've actually trained, you take a bit of a hit, and then it's how good you recover and then you keep progressing and that's why it's so important. And obviously recovery comes down to nutrition, hydration, movement, like general sort of activity. There's a lot of different things that come in and a lot of ways you can go about recovering as well. So we've actually got a blog, haven't we, on the website that's got, I think, 5 or 6 like methods to try. Some of them are things like magnesium baths. If no one's done a magnesium bath, get yourself some like Epsom salts, fill the bath up, get in the bath at night, make sure that whatever bits are sore, get them under the water, and then it transdermally goes into your muscles, and it's a relaxant. Magnesium is a relaxant, so it helps ease tension. So that's one, and there's a few
Stretching, sort of that.
Yeah.
Hydration, that's number one. It's important, it covers everything. Sleep is in this. Creating a routine. Not little and often, don't sleep little and often. Then can tell you but creating a routine and maximising making a priority of your sleep is huge. Just to make you feel good, number one, for your health. But again, a lot of these turn back into if you are looking for any serious physical results, which the reason you're at the gym, yeah, if you want to get fitter, faster, stronger, leaner, and sleeping is going to be a huge part of it. If you struggle with it, again, we've got another blog. If you've got any questions about it, anyone?
Age-related sleep.
Yeah.
Always used to sleep all the way through the night like a log.
Mm-hmm.
You get to a certain age, you have to get up to go through every night, so I never have a full night's sleep anymore.
So we could look at what Ben was talking about before with hydration, about essentially front loading your water. So if you're having your last drink at 7 o'clock and you go to bed at 10 and you still have to get up in the middle of the night to go to the toilet, maybe try and bring that time down so that you don't drink past 6 o'clock. If it gets ridiculous and you can't have a drink for hours before you go, then obviously there's some other stuff in it. There's a few, shows a few vitamins and minerals maybe deficiency if that sort of thing as well.
magnesium again is good. If you get I take it, so I like it because I go quite high dosage on magnesium and it does tend to help with sleep, especially if you wake up, because it chills you out. I actually feel, some people don't feel it quite as much as us, but I feel like I'm taking sleeping tablets when I take it. It properly chills me out.
So you take it at night?
Yeah. But it's an adaptogen, magnesium, so if you do take it in the day, it actually helps with energy. So, but yeah, I take it at night.
Which brand do you have?
I have Nutri, the ones we have. But there's loads, like,
Yeah.
I wouldn't know, apart from them, probably wouldn't know too many good or bad. But you can have a look, there's a website, whenever you're having supplements, go check on Examine, there's a website called Examine. They do all the research on all the different brands.
I'll show you that for you. It's
Yeah.
all independent. So basically, if anyone goes, oh, you should take this supplement, it's really good for you, you put it in an exam and it'll say the things that it's been tested for, how many tests, how they did it, who they run it by, all the data's there, and the results will be found. Because often they're just obviously oversold.
Anyone got any other questions? About anything? Mike's done a little motivational slide there for you.
What are your thoughts on bread and eating bread? Do you guys stay away from it or do you eat it yourselves?
Depends how you
What's that,
react.
sorry? Bread.
Bread, yeah.
Depends how you react with it. Gluten and wheat are often things people struggle to digest. So if you can eat a lot of it and you feel fine, it often blows people up, which is why a lot of people say to stay away from it. It's got a bit of a bad rap. Like if you're going for the right ones, then it can actually be really good for you. Sourdough and wholemeals and things like that can actually add a lot. Rye bread can actually add a lot of positive nutrition to your diet, and then it's all about numbers, the same as anything else.
Yeah, I was thinking about lunch and sometimes you feel tired after you've had that. That's the period of time when you need to be alert.
Yeah.
You know, so
But that's a good sign for how it reacts with you. If you tried going for no bread at that time, you might react a little bit better with it. It can slow some people down. It's quite a common thing. So if you react that way to it, try it again. I'm alright with that. I here and there, not loads, but I generally feel okay with it. But it's different for everybody.
That sort of test that you said there, like when you eat something and you
You're
feel a
aware of
certain way, because everyone's different. Like, it could be the so-called healthiest food you think is possible, but if you don't react very well to it, it might not be right for you. So it's always wary of thinking about how you feel after you've eaten something. The other thing with bread is that I can't think of the word, but it's basically over-made now. Like, there's too much made. So the big companies aren't thinking about the quality of it, they're thinking about trying to ship out as much as possible. Yeah, exactly. So I'd always look, if you've got like local bakeries and things like that near you, like go and get something that they've made, because they're going to have made it with better stuff.
Hot kettle black, really good sourdough.
Yeah, places like that, because they've got the bakery in the back, haven't they?
It's Paul Baker there.
Is it Nicola?
Yeah.
It's better than Holland.
So yeah, I'd look at that rather than buying things either from like coffee shops and things, because they're going to use, obviously they're going to try and get a margin down on it and use cheaper products and stuff, but and also like buying like your Warburtons and stuff like that. The big companies, so they're just shipping loads out. There's not much quality to it. So it's not to say not.
That's in the 20% now. White Walker's bread. That's for the treat days, not for
Yeah.
not in the 80%. That's
Green one.
yeah, you know.
Can I just ask as well? I eat a lot of protein, more than anything. So I don't know how that works out in terms of balancing out everything. Like I eat veg, I stay away from carbs. I don't really like rice, bread, all that stuff. I tend to eat a lot of protein. Is there like any specific proteins you would recommend rather than just me going for anything that's out there?
I think it depends on personal taste.
Again, look, when it comes to stuff like this, we were talking about processed foods. So highly processed meats often isn't going to be great bacon and sausage and things like that. So the cleaner you can get. And then besides that, if you're getting a good quality source of meat, you're fine. If it works for you, again, if you feel good your energy's good with it, then that's fine.
Hitting them local butchers and local
Yes.
bakers.
It makes a big difference. If it's all Tesco meat, then you're going to be worse off than if it's all from local butchers. But generally, if it works for you, it's okay.
But if you're talking differences between like chicken, beef, things like that, I think that's personal choice. If you've gone like high quality meat and you're trying to decide between them, there's obviously loads of stuff about red meat and all that, isn't there? But again, it just comes down to like, there's a lot of other stuff going on in nutrition, and I don't think it really matters to that many people. I just think about what you like and just go as high quality as you can with your protein, but also all your food. You know, there's no.
So this last one, this is a big thing that we talk about. When people think about getting results, either in the gym or especially with reading, they think that, and I'll sure you don't believe how many people say this, I'm all or nothing, I have to do it all. But how often are you doing it all? Like if you're all or nothing, but you only do all for 1 month out of 12, then you often get no results. Yeah? Or you get them results, but you way further back behind those results you were by the time you're back to doing it all again. Yeah? If you were always doing a little something, if you find a way that you could live, train, stay active, eat, and still feel like you're not restricting your life, then you'll get longer, better results. The results you'll get over 6 weeks will be less, but the results that you can get over 6 months are going to be a lot more. So it's about planning it out and taking into account everything that we said. The reason that we put these on as habits, because if you can get into the habit of hitting these points every week, most weeks, if you can win most weeks, win most months, then you're going to be in a better position than you were at the start of the month, rather than keep telling yourself it's going to start Monday and doing nothing about it until Monday. I know nobody in here lives like that, but it's very often a mentality that people have, doing it all. But that's what we meant before. We said all things like that do work, but the bad thing with it is that you can't live with it. So it's all about doing something at all times. That's all.
Cheers for coming, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it. And yeah, we will be running more of these on potentially slightly different topics and stuff as well. So we'll post them in the groups and that when they're going in. And we have recorded it as well, so if you want to watch it back, we'll get it up in the Facebook groups and get it out on email as well. Have you got anything, mate? Sounded all quiet. Sure. Well, yeah. Cheers, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Alright guys, make sure you take some of this food home. We've got
See you guys. See you later.